Thanks so much for joining us. This is great to have you here. Great to see you all here. Thanks for squeezing us in before cocktail hour. Hopefully you'll use that anticipatory energy for cocktail hour to engage us in this conversation. And also, in addition to all you fine people in the room, we are also being live streamed. So hello to all of you on the live stream as well. My name is Jason Cascarino. I'm a strategic advisor and consultant for philanthropies and nonprofits and higher ed institutions, all in the education and youth serving space. I spent a lot of time in philanthropy and running nonprofits. And I'm here with a great group of guests here for panelists to talk about career exploration. And what I'm going to do is, you all have your bios, the great app that the event organizers gave us, so you know you can learn about who they are and their organization and so forth. So I'm just going to go down and introduce them if I can. Just so you can kind of connect faces to names and so forth. I'll start here closest to me and then go down the list here. So Gene Eddy, President and CEO of ASA, American Student Assistance, a national nonprofit dedicated to changing the way middle school and high school students learn about careers and navigate education to career opportunities. Gene, it's fun to have you here and do this with you. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Katie Mote, Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for Project Lead the Way, a nonprofit that empowers students to develop and apply in-demand transportable skills by exploring real-world challenges. Welcome. Oscar Cruz, CEO of Citizen Schools, a national nonprofit supporting students to thrive in school and beyond through hands-on learning and career mentors. Delighted to have you, Oscar. Citizen Schools is one of my favorites, so you're going to get some favoritism here, Oscar. Leverage that for all it's worth. Gautam Bhargava, co-founder and CEO of Ender, a competition platform where kids 7 and older team up and build projects for cash prizes. Great to have you here, Gautam. Mike Marriner, President and co-founder of Roadtrip Nation, which empowers people from all backgrounds to define their own road in life through videos and documentaries, events, courses, and other media and resources. Terrific to have you here, Mike. So let's start by defining career exploration. There's a track here, or a number of sessions around career exploration. You may have gone to some. But let's just sort of, for the benefit of the audience here, let's talk about what we mean by when we say career exploration. If you listened to Tom Friedman this morning, I think that was kind of instructive and informative of how to think about what our young people are kind of moving into. I don't have any frames that are more elegant than Tom Friedman's, but I do certainly, from my own experience, when I was growing up, I think like my parents and certainly grandparents' age, you had one job, right? You would go into a career and it's one thing for your entire life. And then I remember when I was growing up, it was always like you were told you're going to shift careers 7 times. It was always 7. I don't know why 7. It was make it made up, or maybe it was research-based, I'm not sure. And then you go into things like the gig economy, it's sort of gig work. And clearly the pandemic has really sort of changed how even we think about careers and life, really, how we kind of balance those two, right? So when we think about careers, particularly for Gen Z, so I'm Gen X in case you haven't noticed. So Gen Z are my kids. So for the Gen Z, so the young people today, how do we talk about careers? What do we even say about it? What is a career, and what is this thing that we call career exploration? So let's start there. Jean, do you want to kick it off, and then we can hear from others as well?
Sure. I think career exploration has got everything to do with, first and foremost, kids identifying their passions and their interests and the things that they feel as though they have natural abilities with. Because I think that has to start there. So often, I think we leave anything about careers until much later in the day when we should have been examining how a young person really feels about the things that make their heart sing. In the intersection between the things that they love to do and their natural abilities should be, I believe, connected to the potential opportunities to live that the rest of their lives. And to me, that's career. What you do every day with those things, with that combination, that wonderful combination, really is that career journey that you should be going on.
Others, thoughts, challenges, additions? adjustments?
I've always thought about careers as the intersection of what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and what can make you money, and that's really all that it is.
It's very simple.
So with each generation, I think it changes a little bit. One of the interesting things about Gen Z now is kids are obsessed with being content creators on YouTube and TikTok, and that's totally okay. There are people making wonderful salaries being content creators. My definition of career exploration, and I think one of the things that we're particularly passionate about at Ender, is that we think career exploration has to be an active process in which kids are in the driver's seat versus just passive consumers of content. I remember when I was in school, the big thing was kids would search careers and look up salary data and job growth, and it's really not the right way to explore careers. You have to do what it is that you would be doing in those careers. And so to me, defining career exploration is making sure that it's an active learning process where the student is in the driver's seat.
That's great. Go ahead.
I love that. And I was thinking about President Cruz's interview this morning. Big themes I heard were empowerment, consistently referencing the empowerment piece. Also, the ability to thrive, heard that several times, and an acknowledgement that the world is ever evolving. That's Project Lead the Way's mission statement. We empower students to thrive in an evolving world. And your reference to what do I love and how can I make money, I think we translate as relevance. So why do I need to be on that road? Where is it going and who cares? And why is the way you're making me spend my time in the classroom right now going to help me get there? And so as we think about career exploration, it is the consistent relevance of what am I learning, why does it matter? And all of those skills are the inputs to career, which is just one moment where you're applying a certain set of content knowledge and you are using your critical thinking skills, your creative thinking skills before you adapt and you move on to the next moment where you're making money, doing something new that you love.
Jason, this is an interesting question because you mentioned obviously COVID as a variable in there, what has happened. And I think the nation is also going through a big, process of reckoning around race. And what we start to see as well is in our youth is this social consciousness about trying to solve the problems in their community. And a career, what does that mean in terms of career? In terms of when youth are trying to say, if this is relevant to my life, I have to deal with all these things. Students are not learning in a bubble. They're learning in their community, they're learning in their families. So as I'm starting to hear more and more youth talk about career, they're also thinking about what path am I going to take that is going to help solve some of these, issues that are confronting our nation. So that may take us in a little different way of understanding career, because sometimes, I work in a nonprofit, many others, it's not necessarily that just the calculation of salary, but rather is what's going to make me happy and what's going to connect with my passion. So I think that more and more we hear in our citizen schools, we've started to also explore experiential learning projects that are not just STEM. They're issues on civic engagement, right? And you can use the same framing of understanding career exploration in non-STEM environments, right? So I think that's a piece that we have to start paying attention more about how youth are starting to see their career path in the future.
Yeah, I agree on the interest-based education side. And when you think about it in terms of all the tools that most students use today, like the Myers-Briggs personality test, where you spend an hour, doing 200 different questions and get one result out in terms of congratulations, you're going to go on to be, whatever. That's and we interviewed someone on one of our first road trips a long time ago, and he said the world of careers is kind of like the world of television. And he said, when I grew up in London in the 50s or 60s, there was 4 TV channels, the BBC, Channel 4, and in America, NBC, ABC, and he's like, now there's cable, and he's like, it's the same with careers. And so there's no way that you can create an algorithm and try to map all these different careers. The most important thing is career exploration and to do it through the lens of, your interests. And the one thing I'll just add to what we've seen is that especially students who grew up in backgrounds that have a lack of social capital and a lack of role modeling opportunities, the importance of seeing people like them from an occupational identity standpoint, and that's where what we believe at Roadtrip Nation is the storytelling aspect is really, really important. And then the storytelling at scale to give students a chance to see people like them in a variety of fields, so they have the confidence and the belief that they can actually, that there's a place for them in the future of work.
You can tell a lot of the like-mindedness or kindred spirits here on the dais. But we're going to start to get opposition here, because the session title, as you'll recall, is Learning About Career as a Dichotomy, Inside or Outside the Classroom. And we have different approaches for doing career exploration. By the way, dichotomy, I looked it up for you, because that's what I do as a moderator. So that's two things that are opposed, or they're actually, importantly, or they're represented as being opposed. Dicho in two parts. For our purposes, career exploration, we're talking about in classroom, or sort of what we would see as sort of traditional, in quotes. There's a lot of variations in this country about how education is done, so some are more traditional than others. But in the sort of common educational classroom, career exploration in that environment, or in what I would kind of refer to direct to student or direct to youth, which can be done in a classroom in setting, but it's often sort of seen as being outside a classroom environment. So that's the opposition that we're going to set up today to see how it goes. But to set this up, Gene, ASA over the last few years has made a number of investments in career exploration in both of these domains. You've done investments in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Delaware, and California, at least, maybe in other places. Tell us what you have learned from those investments in these differing approaches, these different strategies. What have you learned?
So I would say that when we first started down this road of career exploration and trying to engage young people, first off, we started in middle school, because we believe that that is absolutely the place to start as far as having young kids be curious and not have so many set ideas about what they might want to do next. They still want to go exploring, and so we want to help them do that. And so the first things we did a number of pilot programs with schools in all of those states, and worked with some fantastic superintendents who had ideas about career exploration classes for middle school students. And what we found was that they were a great success. The problem was no two superintendents wanted to do it the same way. And in addition to that, we could do it school system by school system, but there are an awful lot of kids out there right now. We have 30 million kids between 6th grade and 12th grade that I feel we're missing the boat on as far as helping them with career exploration. And so what we've tried to do is work out a way that we could reach as many of them as possible. And despite working in all of those states, we could not affect the number of kids' journeys as we wanted to. So we decided to approach it from a beyond the classroom point of view. In other words, we looked at digital solutions to help students go out and do some of this exploration, do some of the trying that Oscar was talking about, where you could actually get your hands on something and try and do something as they were moving through this process so that they could develop a plan. I think both can work. I think the problem is that we have an awful lot of young people out there right now who need help in the career and educational journey, in the information journey, and they can't possibly get it as quickly as we need to deliver it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned middle school also, and you know this, in terms of from a developmental perspective, oftentimes career exploration, we kind of wait until high school, like later adolescence or even after that. And if you have any encounter with middle schoolers, sort of young adolescents, I have one at home. I work a lot in middle school. Middle school is the exact right time for career exploration. It's when they're forming their identities, they're building senses of agency about themselves, and they're actually cognitively, for the first time ever in their development, thinking about themselves in their future. And so it's a perfect time to facilitate that knowledge. It's highly connected to the developmental science. There's a lot of places we could go here. We're going to go a little bit deeper into two big aspects of this dichotomy. Part of it is where best to reach youth with career exploration. So Katie and Oscar, your organizations are more in that sort of quote-unquote traditional classroom environments. Oscar, of course, you're more of a hybrid, I guess I should say, given that you do a lot of out-of-school time work as well, but still within like school campuses and within that sort of structure. Some might say, well, the traditional classrooms might be too constraining. There's not enough capacity, or the accountability structures don't really allow for enough flexibility to introduce career exploration, all of these things. Given that, what is the case that you would make for having career exploration being done effectively in classroom environments?
So I appreciate the setup of the dichotomy, and I know that that's what we're doing here. But I would say I think the pandemic catapulted all of us into hybrid teaching and learning. And so we have had that entree into needing to be able to figure out how to translate these powerful classroom activities into meaningful online virtual experiences. It also disrupted the idea of what is a classroom, where is it? It disrupted the idea of time, right? In terms of in-school time, out-of-school time. It's all just time. And so how do we have engaging experiences that students want to participate in where they're seeing these various connections? A point that I know has come up in a variety of conversations today, we were talking, Oscar and I, about this, there is no substitute for relationships. And even in his remarks, President Crow was talking about not wanting to erode the human spirit. There is no substitute for the power that a teacher makes in impacting a student's life and developing that relationship and being the person that allows them and exposes them to what they could be, because we cannot be what we can't see. And there will never be a substitute for the role that teachers play in that space. So I hear and agree that the idea of classroom has been disrupted, and we have developed really powerful ways of navigating and moving across these various spaces. But that role of teacher is so key, and students and teachers, parents, caregivers, all of us need that community and that ecosystem to develop that confidence, which is core to understanding what they can be at the end of their K-12 career.
And by the way, I should have said this. So in the classroom approach, these are teachers who are embedding in some way career exploration into their curriculum. Is it separate? It's kind of, this is the conversation in the SAL world. Is it sort of a separate instruction, so some time during the week that you do career exploration, or is it really embedded within the classroom environment? And I know, Oscar, you deal with both teachers and also with mentors. So you're bringing in another complex of adults into the equation as well. So for the two of you,
my take is, it's not a question of whether they can or they should, districts embed career exploration within the school day. I think it's an issue of survival. If public education is going to stay relevant, I think that the notion that we can separate those things, like Katie was mentioning, is completely gone. No longer is knowledge the asset of value that is being transmitted in the school system. Someone who knows something and then is giving it to someone else. My 8-year-old son can pick up the phone and find whatever information he wants from the web or from YouTube. So the question about career exploration now becomes one where the system is more facilitating, helping students be able to make sense of the information that they're accessing, right? So I think in my mind, career exploration is not that we're trying to teach or help a student become a computer science for a specific purpose, or an engineer, but rather some of those competencies about problem solving, about being growth mindset, everything that we know is going to be more foundational for them to explore careers. No longer is it 7 careers or jobs that you get in life. I just read an article about a young woman that came from college. In 2 years, she jumped 8 jobs and got to earn $125,000 a year. If we're trying to prepare and start thinking about careers and say, we know what the careers are going to be, and we're going to try to change the system to address that. By the time we do that, it's already going to be a new set of careers. So I think we have to look a little deeper in terms of what is it that we're giving and preparing and enhancing and supporting our students for them to do whatever career they want at whatever point in their lives that they want. And so at least that's a little bit of at least the approach Citizen Schools is trying to have, is that there's something more substantial in the way that we want students to gain through the in-school environment.
So you sort of argue that helping to more actively or intentionally make the connection of what students are actually learning in school with the career, possibilities is an asset to do it in the sort of school environment if it's done well. Obviously, if it's sort of on the side here and it's disconnected, that would not be the best way to do it. But there is an advantage to being able to make those connections. Let's flip to the other side here. So Gautam and Mike, your organizations have these platforms for career exploration. I call it direct to students. You might call it something else, but that's the term that I use. But some would argue that, well, as we just talked, look, there's not enough structure or scaffolding, sorry to use edgy speak, for youth to take full advantage of these platforms if it's outside of the educational environment. Plus, aren't you competing for attention? Would young people be drawn to you versus, Mr. Beast or some guy making a Minecraft in his basement, on his PC? I have no experience with that at home, by the way. This is just totally guessing. So what is the case then that you would make for having career exploration done in the ways that you do it in more of this direct-to-student approach?
Sure, absolutely. It might be worth just sharing a little bit more context about what my organization does. We are building a competition platform where kids can team up and build projects for cash prizes. And the core thesis of what our product is about is that the only way to explore a career is to do what it is what someone in a career would be doing. And that the best way to do that is by building a project. So if you want to understand what a software engineer does, you should build a software project. If you want to understand what an animator does, you should build an animation project. So career exploration should be centered more about what you do versus who you want to become. And that's really the premise. And we host competitions in a variety of different topics. So animation competitions, design competitions. You can imagine it kind of like a science fair, but we want to host it in a variety of different topics where kids actually have an incentive to explore careers outside of the classroom. And when we started this organization, we really thought about what is the best way to get kids to explore careers. And our big takeaway was that, number one, it had to be student-directed. Kids had to be in the driver's seat. And just right off the bat, that is a little bit at odds with the traditional classroom model, which is very centered around being teacher-directed, where you have a teacher and really students are passive consumers of the knowledge that the teacher is transmitting. And we just think that's a broken model for this type of exploration in terms of really being effective for kids. And the second part of it was this project-based learning side of it, and that is also at odds with how a lot of classrooms function. So, we feel very strongly that the combination of these two things is really the only way that you can provide the experience that kids need to understand what it is that they want to go into. And in many ways that those are just at odds with traditional classrooms. Just the last thing that I'll add to that is that you also have a little bit of an incentive problem when you're trying to push career exploration into an existing curriculum. Is the goal of the teacher to teach math or to help you explore a career? It's really tough to do both. So, the other thing about kind of going direct to kid is that when you're working and building products directly for students, your incentives are aligned as an organization with what you need to do. If a student doesn't really enjoy your product, they're just not going to use it. Whereas in a classroom, you're really designing products for a teacher to use. So our primary approach is just that you can build the right types of experiences outside of the constraints of a traditional classroom. And that's really important for delivering effective experiences, for delivering scalable experiences. It's really the only way that I think you can actually get to helping kids explore careers.
And just for can we just explain the mechanics here a little bit? So I think everybody sort of understands what a classroom looks like and a teacher sort of standing, in a classroom and what that engagement looks like. How do young people come to your platform? How do they know it exists? How do they interface with it?
It's direct to consumer. So we actually started with Minecraft and Roblox competitions. So that made it really easy for us to get kids. And what we do is we sponsor the Mr. Beasts of the world, and we host Minecraft competitions. And then the idea is, as kids come from Minecraft competitions, they'll stick around and they'll do coding competitions or animation competitions. Games in particular are a really great entry point for a lot of kids to explore careers. So we try and leverage that. And then the other thing that's really important about our model is it's viral. So all of the competitions are team-based. So kids invite each other to join the competitions and actually get to build these projects as a team.
Great. Mike, talk about your platform and how young people interface with it.
Yeah. So there's two main parts of what we do. So we have the actual road trip part of what we do, and then we have a project-based learning framework as well. And the road trip part is, exactly how it sounds. It's, we have huge multiple motorhomes. One is out front right now, and students live in those motorhomes and go across America and interview and talk to people in different careers to learn how they got to where they are today. We obviously can't, it's not a super scalable model because we can't keep buying motorhomes. But over time, we've gotten really sophisticated with the content development around those road trips, and then the database development of that content, and specifically the metadata and the tagging system around the content. We learned early on that the impact from the road trip was not so much the road trip and the motorhome, but it was the social capital development and the role modeling opportunities. And to your point, that's hard in schools because schools program to the A to G, the standards. And so all the research shows that social capital development, especially developmental social capital, which is like the skills to build your own social capital, especially for students that didn't grow up with those affinity groups, is critical to career success. And we found that with the students who've longitudinally gone through Roadtrip Nation too. But where does that fit in a school? So but for us, that's where the project-based learning programmatic piece is important, because we've been able to scale the interviewing part without the motorhome, without the road trip. So yeah. I mean, I agree with everything. I hate to be the agree with everyone guy in the panel, but to your point, it's true. The fidelity, the implementation, the competing with cats burning on YouTube stuff. I mean, it's hard. So what we've tried to do over time is take a student-centered approach to our design. I think that's a big problem in just education in general, is designing for the institution as opposed to the student. But to me, the best case scenario is designing for the student and then finding a way to backdoor into schools. And standards are changing, So I think it's complicated, It's not super. I think at the end of the day, if it's about impact and engagement and speaking student language, and reaching students where they're at through an equity lens, which is hard, you kind of have to think about it. At least we have over time. Our journey has become starting with a more of a media-based approach and has evolved into more of a hybrid-based approach.
So not to get to the twist at the end of the movie so quickly, but there is a lot of commonality here, isn't there? I hear project-based learning from the two of you, experiential from the two of you, connected, relevance, connectedness, all of those kinds of things. And so the wonder is would you guys be opposed for your platforms to be used in classrooms, or are they being used in classrooms?
I mean, not at all. That's the dream case, is for education to catch up into value. And I actually think the pandemic was a huge step forward. Just even take video-based content. Before the pandemic, everyone was like, oh, we don't need video-based content online. We can do downloadable PDFs and Myers-Briggs personality tests and all this stuff. But now it's video-based rich media storytelling assets is table stakes, So that it feels like there are systems changing and more welcoming doormats for programs like ours, which is great.
And you all agree? I mean, in terms of thinking about how you support teachers in classrooms and even with mentors, that these kinds of platforms can be integrated in some meaningful way.
No, definitely. I think that obviously for the purpose of the panel, we're trying to create this dichotomy that, you got to choose one or the other. But, in real life, we have to break those walls between those two, types of approaches. But, something you said about, I think, COVID really is the reason why I feel the districts and school systems are at a prime moment right now to think differently. Because in a matter of a year, the systems completely, districts completely broke. And teachers had to be creative. Everybody had to figure out what to do. And for a moment of time, I think there's that window of opportunity for us to rethink what learning happens, right? What combination of programs could happen? How do we develop programs that are student-based, thinking about the student experience? I think we're going to be entering a moment where it's going to be it's a choice where districts may have to feel like they got to go back to what they used to do, in order to make progress into addressing the learning gap, or actually address what the students are saying. They're saying we want relationship, something that impacts us, or passion. I see that as an opportunity. I'm trying to be the positive in thinking about this, is that that's the reason why all type of partnerships all along the way can work together.
Junior, you want to say something?
I'd just like to make a couple of comments on this. I think the first one is Gautam made a really good point, and that is kids in this generation are really looking for a voice. They're looking for agency, and they love the idea of some self-direction in their learning. So when I talk about beyond the classroom, I'm hoping that we can incorporate some beyond the classroom type experiences so that kids can still get that because they want it. That doesn't mean, I would be the last person to say, we can't forget the teachers, the parents, the mentors, all the people out there that are working with these young people. And my hope is that students will get a number of experiences, whether it's beyond the classroom or in the classroom. But we found when students go beyond the classroom, they are going right back, particularly in middle school. The people I ask the most about what they've just done and experienced is they go back and they ask their middle school teacher. So it's not as if they're doing this all by themselves. They are asking their teachers, their parents, and people around them, well, what do you think about this? And then they go back and do more research, or they do exactly what Gautam is talking about. They go out and try something. So I think there is a dichotomy, but I think that everybody's going to play a part, for sure.
So in the interest of time, I do want to get to the second issue that we wanted to talk about, and that is, Mike, you had mentioned the notion of outcomes. Like, what are we trying to accomplish, and how do we know we're being successful with this? Katie and Oscar, teachers are used to measuring academic outcomes. We're getting better at measuring social and emotional competencies. What outcomes might we expect to see, or they expect to see, educators expect to see, using a classroom-embedded approach to career exploration?
I think a primary outcome is all of these inputs lead to shared outcomes across understanding academic content, developing these key skills that we know are critical for students to move across careers, and then also helping students to understand what they are learning in these courses and in these spaces is the outcome of K-12 education, which is to go into the workforce and to be able to thrive and evolve and have multiple careers. So then the more we can make these less siloed activities, today we are engaging in X classroom activity. Now next period we'll talk about career learning, and that being so choppy and disconnected. The work that we do, for example, at Project Lead the Way in our courses is career learning. Acquiring these skills and competencies is what a student needs in order to have lifelong success. So I think I would challenge or encourage the more that we can make this seamless and one experience, the better, so students see those connections.
Yeah, thank you. And just for context, when Jason refers to a revolution, we were running a lot of after-school programs at citizen schools, trying to do the experiential learning and mentorship after school. And we did a pivot around 3 years ago where we're saying, that's great, we had a lot of success, but we have to address the system as a whole, so we're working more with middle schools. Once we start working with middle schools teachers, the points of reference, the indicators start to change. We start looking at issues of even the teachers' efficacy. Do they feel like they're able to try new things? How confident are they feeling? We are looking at students' growth mindset, resiliency, and this is a particular point where I also like to emphasize is that it's not like we're giving this to the students. The students we work with are great, they're resilient. We saw that through COVID. It's just we're creating an environment where that comes out to the forefront because that hasn't been it hasn't been emphasized as a priority. So once we start looking about on a different scale and not just on the test scores, do students feel connected? Do they feel that they have trusted relationships? Do they feel pushed and motivated? So now our lenses become a little bit different, and we got to also pay attention to a lot of qualitative data and feedback from the students themselves.
Yeah. Gautam and Mike, I imagine, and you'll correct me, but the director-student approach with the technology probably allows for some measuring and tracking outcomes, at least in terms of you're looking at trends. What are young people sort of attracted to, and what they're kind of gravitating towards. Tell us what outcomes of success you would expect from the direct-to-student approach.
I can speak to our outcomes. We are big fans of portfolios at Ender. So what we look for is when kids do these competitions, what types of projects are they building? What are the complexities of these projects? What types of skills are they using in the projects that they're creating? So we really look at the output of what kids are creating as a proxy for measuring what they're learning. Now, that might not be as scientifically rigorous as some of the assessments used in school, but one of the perks of being direct to student is we don't have to deal with state standards, so all we have to do is prove to parents and kids that they are getting educational value. And there's something really, really powerful about a kid building a project that they've done themselves, a parent being able to see it, a teacher being able to see it. So we really look for, projects and portfolios as sort of our way of tracking the output.
Yeah, we just we've been doing the road trips for over 15 years now. So we just completed a 15-year retrospective study on like where are the road trippers now 15 years later, which has been really cool to see because you can see how the road trip, was it like kind of like a moment in time, or like what was the effect that had on their ongoing journey, and what we saw was the social capital piece. And for many of these students, especially the first-gen college-going students who had limited social capital, those relationships that they built through those experiences ended up opening doors for them, getting them jobs, internships, apprenticeships. And it's not surprising when you think about like all of our own personal journeys. It's the people, it's not, so that was a really interesting experience. Then for our project-based learning piece, we do a pre and post survey, and we can't have like the same degree of like rigorous 15-year retrospective, but we are seeing some of the same indicators of, students actually, we asked this question at the end of the project-based learning, like, did this increase your role modeling opportunities or work-based learning opportunities, And I remember one of the responses was like, duh, I'm doing an apprenticeship right now for the person I interviewed, So just the importance of relationships and adult actor relationships from a role modeling mentorship standpoint, but allowing students to be the one in the driver's seat creating that rather than like dropping them into a job shadowing thing or something.
Gene, you mentioned a measure that I really liked that you think is most important, which is confidence.
I think what we found, and we do have an outcomes pyramid that we go against as far as steps students take within our platform to get to the next step of career exploration and testing and trying things. And I think what we hope for and what we are able to now measure is how confident is a young person in the direction that they're taking once they complete high school. And it's not, I want to be a neurosurgeon. It is, I want to go and I want to study these things. This is why. There's nothing quite like confidence as you are, whether you're going into college or you're going into any kind of technical training that allows you to say, yes, I've got this information I need to be able to make the best choice for the next step in my life.
Yeah, I love that. So I host a podcast called Lessons in Adolescence. You can download it at your favorite podcast platform. And the question I asked at the end for everybody is, what is one thing that you want the audience to come away with from this conversation? Something that they ought to know or something that they ought to do in like 15 seconds each.
Well, thank you. The purpose of K-12 education is so that students can have successful careers. And we will have to achieve scale, all of us are going to have to work together and blend these modalities so that we can produce enough students who are successfully in the workforce.
Oscar?
The assets that communities have, and I know many of us are focused on targeting low-income communities of color. The assets these communities have are tremendous, and we have to build upon that. It's not like we're dumping things into those communities. And the more we tap into that power of the community through mentors as well, through partnerships, through families, this is a transformation of how education and teaching and learning happens.
Gautam?
One of the things that we try and keep in mind is that career exploration is just as much about learning what not to do as it is learning what to do. I think that's often lost when you're in the weeds of trying to build products. So that's mine.
Mike, last few seconds.
I would say there's no organization is a silver bullet, and I agree. Like thinking about it through a collective impact lens and like working together and all doing what we do really, really well and combining our efforts is like I think the path. So personally,
Terrific.
Well said. All of you, well said.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Go enjoy your cocktails. Thanks to everybody for joining us on the live stream as well. Really appreciate it. And thanks to Jean, Katie, Oscar, Gautam, and Mike. Terrific panel. Please help us thank them.